Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of What's New in Data. Very excited for the guests we have today. We have Bruno Aziza, Head of Analytics at Google Cloud. Bruno, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you don't need an introduction, but it would be great for you to tell us a bit about yourself.
Of course, yeah, and I'm looking forward to the relationship I'm going to build with your audience. So I'm Bruno Aziza, and my last name is spelled Aziza. It reads form backwards the same way, so it's easy to remember me. I'm currently running outbound product management for data and analytics at Google, and I have been in the data space my entire career. So if you remember companies like Business Objects, for instance, before I went IPO and when we bought Crystal Decisions and Acta and so forth, I was part of that team a long time ago. I also worked with very small companies and helped them launch companies like SciSense, for instance, or Alpine Data Labs that sold to TIBCO. And then I've had the opportunity to work with large vendors as well. After Business Objects and went to work to Microsoft. So I worked there for about 7 years, where we kind of took all the products that were in the ecosystem of Microsoft Big Data and AI and analytics, put them all into one business and built a billion-dollar business. I worked at Oracle as well, and then of course now I'm at Google. I've had the opportunity to write 2 books in the topics. So even outside of work, my passion really is reading, learning, and writing about data analytics and helping scale this fantastic industry we have by working at vendors and working with customers.
You recently just came out with a new article on data mesh. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, first, thank you for complimenting me on the content. I don't invent a lot of this content. It really is the result of working directly with customers and kind of seeing patterns in what they're telling me and how I can help them. And so essentially I try to just, share that with the community, and the community's repaid me multiple times over by tagging me and quoting me and bring me into conversation. So, this year, the term data mesh I think is going to be an important one for leaders to understand, and more importantly, not misunderstand. And so this article, what I focused on is going back to the genesis. Why data mesh? What is it, and what does it solve? And then try to help people think beyond just the terminology, because there's a lot of terminology debates around it, by guiding them around a few things. The first one is what I call the 3Ds of data mesh, which is you're going to have 3 types of people about the data mesh. You're going to have the disciples that are going to tell you everything that is connected to the reality of the original definition, as Zermatt kind of wrote about a few years ago. You have the distractors of the data mesh, the folks that are telling you that there's nothing new here. And I think, it's true. It's reusing some concepts that existed in the past, but it's also enabled by new technology, and particularly the cloud is disrupting, kind of the modern data architecture. So I think it's an important thing to take on and not ignore. And then you have the distorters, the companies that are going to try to latch on to that and then say, hey, buy my product if what you want is a data mesh. And so I kind of try to give you guidance around that so you can have a framework for how you ingest, if you will, all that information, and also kind of position the data mesh in the continuum of becoming a data-driven organization. My observation has been that it's a maturity, and the maturity starts with building your technical infrastructure for having visibility and cataloging all the data that you need to work with, from transactional to analytical. The second data mesh principle is a second level, if you will, once the technical foundation is there, so you can organize your team for distributed insights, distributed innovation, right? How do you have centralized governance while you have innovation at the edge? And the data mesh as an organizational construct, I think, helps a lot of organizations to think about that, organize themselves. And then finally, now what happens after the data mesh? Well, what happens is now you're building data products. And so now you have the technical and you have the people structure in order for you to become a true data company. And what a data company does is it outputs data products that can drive value to the business. So that's why I called the second part of the article is the data mesh is not the beginning and it's neither the end. It's part of a continuum and a maturity that most of the organizations I work with are kind of moving along. And so important term, but also important to understand it in its context.
Do you think there is one specific technology that data leaders should be looking at when trying to evaluate if a data mesh is right for them?
Oh, yes, there is at least two or three areas that they need to make sure they evaluate. The first one is, of course, the catalog category where, you want to make sure that you're looking at the entirety of your data, that you're understanding the data to the extent that is beyond your data lakes and beyond your data warehousing and data mart solutions that are disparate across organizations. So cataloging technology is important there. The second one is, technology called data fabric, which is around this idea of, okay, now I've got distributed data. I understand what this data is. Can I effectively manage this data? And so having central policies that are applicable to distributed data, I think is an important part of the technology stack that you need. You also need a modern data warehouse or a modern analytics platform that allows you to ingest at real-time speed, allows you to analyze at unlimited scale, and allows you to activate to end users really with no limits, right? So a system that is open enough so any application, any business intelligence tool can draw from this data that now has been made available to everyone. So there are certainly, a lot of technologies, and I'm sure that, I'm forgetting some here, but the foundational aspects I think would probably have to be cataloging, data fabric, and an analytics platform that is a modern one. And what I mean by that is it's cloud native, it's open to multiple clouds, and it's real time by design, and it's also enabling activation by design. So you think here about embedded machine learning would be one of the attributes of that platform.
Yeah, I would love to dive into one of the points that you brought up with the with analytics platforms, which was being real time by design. What's the
Yeah.
catalyst for that?
Well, I think there are a few reasons for why real time really matters to organizations. I mean, it wasn't very long ago that organizations could only build dashboards to look at what they sold yesterday, right? And that probably wasn't great 5 years ago. It's certainly not up to the expectations of your business and the ambition of most leaders today, right? I mean, especially over the last 2 years, we saw the acceleration of digitalization, and the people that or the organizations that are going to be able to become the top leaders in the industry are the ones that are able to work with the data as it's coming in. And so there's multiple attributes to this, not just being able to ingest the data and act on it in real time, but it's also being able to maybe transform it in movement and also work machine learning algorithms while the data is being ingested, so you can add value to the data as it's coming in and how it's being outputted as part of your applications. And so I think the issue in the past has been we didn't necessarily have the infrastructure available at scale and in a managed way. Doing this previously required a lot of work with a lot of data engineers that had to do a lot of work by themselves and had to support the system. Now you have a lot of solutions in the market that give you this ability to just get on this real time opportunity much faster than you could in the past. And so, there's no secret here, right? The faster you get to the data, the faster you can act on it, the better in control you are of your destiny. And so I think it's just going to be the norm, right? Real time is no longer an exception for organizations. It's it's just what's expected of your average data leader today.
That's such a great point. And one of the stories that Google Cloud wrote about, which I really agreed with, it was when you were looking at major retail, Macy's, you published a story on that. Stream on our side, we also did a conference with Macy's at Google Cloud Next in 2020, and they talked about the value of real time as well. just being able to have access to real-time data across all your business and consumer applications, and I think more, like you mentioned, more enterprises, more companies are going to start treating real time as a reality, not just an exception.
And there are many use cases where real time makes a true difference. I mean, if you're in retail, the inventory management, particularly as you're selling items online, is extremely important because you never want to be in a situation where you are carrying the wrong inventory and you're not being agile enough, or you're not taking advantage of the signals you're getting, so you can provide the best products to the people that are looking for it at the time that they're looking for it, right? Because they have the ability, particularly as they're working with with you online, they're just one click away from the next retailer that might actually have the item in inventory. So this inventory management issue was a problem before, when people had to go to in-person stores. And I worked as in a retailer when I started my career, and working on SAP systems for a large retailer in France. And I could see that, right? You had prediction models that would take into account the inventory from yesterday, and we would certainly miss the wave by having a large amount of inventory in the store of boots, even though we were, it was sunny outside, and that was just a result of, well, 2 weeks ago it was very cold. And so this idea of having real-time info and inventory management is extremely important, and I think that the case study talks a lot about that. The other piece where it's really important is pricing and real-time offers, right? When you have someone visiting your online website and you have the ability to gather their signal in real time and kind of associate that signal with what you know of other visitors, you can create a more compelling experience for people visiting us. And now they're not only buying from you more because you're presenting them with the options that they actually need at that point in time, but they also know that they can come to you because you're a smart, retailer. You are not suggesting socks when they're buying glasses, right? You're helping them kind of complete their picture, either because they know what they want and you're suggesting that a lot faster. And sometimes you're helping them discover things that they might not have thought about. Recommendation engines are a great example of that. I always talk about the magic of our world is when I'm able to tell you something about you that you don't know about yourself. And I think having real-time insights at scale enables these scenarios that we just simply couldn't get to in the past, and maybe we didn't even ask. Now you have the technology for it. So it really kind of opens up all this potential that in the past wasn't even within reach, not even technically, but just intellectually, we weren't asking those questions.
That's such a great point, which is now that you have basically unlimited compute at your fingertips, unlimited storage, and all these great technologies that are just available on demand, the possibilities have completely shifted, and there's just so much more data and AI executives can deliver. And these really come down to consumer experiences at the end of the day. Like when we were talking about the retail example, one of the users I worked with specifically had one problem where their customers would be browsing an e-commerce site or some sort of website where they're buying products, and the inventory data, if that inventory data was wrong, it would actually have a negative customer experience, right? Imagine you bought a shirt because it said it was in stock. Next thing you see is a email that says it's back ordered 2 months. Well, hey, I would have just bought it on another website if I knew that it wasn't in stock at your site, right? So, and I think this is
Yeah.
the type of digital first experiences that all data leaders, all digital leaders need to start thinking about.
And I think this is becoming increasingly true, the reality for a lot of industries. Here we're talking about retailers, but if you're in the context of financial services as well, this has to, feel very true. If you're in the business of transportation, this rings, very true of the reality. I mean, you take financial services organizations, you can now, invest in seconds, right? So you can the experiences that we expect either on our browser or on our mobile phone are so much beyond what we were able to do maybe 5 years ago. If I told you you're landing at San Francisco airport and all you have to do is pick up your phone and order an Uber. You would have thought that's kind of a crazy thing to think about. No, I'm going to call someone I know. I'm going to call a taxi. I'm going to wait. I'm going to do all these things. Well, now not only that you can order a cab from your phone, but you can also see exactly where this cab is. So, and you have a different relationship with the cab itself, where one, you know who they are. You, of course, you can rate them, and they can rate you. So it creates a nicer relationship. But also even beyond the relationship you have with the cab when you've left something in that car. I mean, it sounds like a simple, trivial example, but actually it talks a lot to how we're just becoming increasingly connected, and the definition of what a customer experience is has changed dramatically. I mean, I don't know if you've left anything in an Uber before and left anything in the cab before, but in the old world, well, the cab leaves, that's it. You don't know who they are, you get connected to them. I've left a couple of things in Ubers and they immediately just, I connect to the driver and they can tell me and they bring it back or I find them. So it's just the type of expectations that we have today. Think now, fast forward 10 years from now, what other customer experiences do we have the opportunity to make better? If you're in financial services, if you're in retail, any business, in food delivery. I'll give you an example. We work with a company called Delivery Hero. It's one of the largest food delivery organizations outside of the US. And they have operations in lots of different countries. But one of the particular uh, complexities and opportunities of their business is that they also do work in Asia and in parts where it's very dense population. And sometimes the delivery they do is really next door, the original kitchen where the food is made to the person that is being delivered, they're really next door to each other. So the horizontal distance, if you will, from a prediction standpoint, is not that much. So if I just live next door to you, technically it'll take me 2 minutes to deliver that food to you after I know it's made. But the issue is you might be living on the 52nd floor of a tower that's next door. So what they've been able to determine is not just horizontal distance, but also vertical distance, where they understand the traveling time of the elevators in that tower. And they can tell you to the minute if you're on the 52nd floor versus if you're on the 30th floor, when will you get your food? And so it's the type of problems like that that we just never thought about solving in the past, that now not only we're going to be able to ask, we're going to be able to solve, and the result of that is just superior customer intelligence, customer experience, which will lead to better services and better relationship with what ultimately drives your business, which is selling goods and services to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really good segue uh, to the fact that you run a really excellent series of customer stories called Data Journeys. And I really enjoy watching that on the YouTube playlist that you run. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, Data Journeys is a series every Tuesday morning. We publish a new interview of a customer, and the way you should think about it is, this is not a case study. So I'm not attempting to get them to talk about the results or the ROI on the products or anything like that. What I'm trying to kind of create for them is a platform where they can share their best practices. And so you'll see companies there like TELUS and Geotab and KeyBank, and Delivery Hero is one of them, Feeding America. Basically, what I'm looking for is interesting lessons that these leaders have been able to learn and that they're willing to share with us. And by us, I don't mean Google, I mean Google, of course, but also the rest of the community. So people can connect with each other and kind of advance the space here. And so my approach is really simple. The interviews are typically 10 to 15 minutes, so it doesn't take you a very long time to attend it, but it creates this opportunity for people to connect around essentially three questions. So if you were a customer tomorrow and I interviewed you, I would ask you, tell me more about your company, John. Tell me about the use cases where you are innovating, and tell me what you've learned, good and bad. So the best and the worst practices. And what this has done, we launched this about a year ago. What this has done is really created a way for customers to connect with each other. Just this past week, we had Ramnik, who is the head of infrastructure at LiveRamp, and she's talking about, her um, her journey. And right, probably an hour after we published the video, I had 3 or 4 customers reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, can you introduce me to her?" Because I want to connect with her and I want to learn. I'm experiencing the same thing that she's experienced, and she's way ahead of where I am. I want to talk to her and so forth. And so when I get a sign like this, it's a sign that this is working, which is what I'm trying to do is, unearth and then share in a broad manner all the great stories that we hear. Because, I could tell you the amount of innovation that's happening with our customers is really quite incredible. And so I just wanted to turn the mic to them and say, here, you tell us the story, and we'll learn from you um, as a community. And so it's been very successful, and it's a platform for customers to connect with him with the rest of the community and with each other.
Excellent. I just love the human element. There's a human building this stuff, and they're learning things along the way, and then there's a human that's has the downstream consumption of what they built, and just being able to think like I think one of the great things that we're onto this decade, which is different from last decade, is we're actually talking about the value of these data journeys, and like we're just learning so much, and we're providing so much value to the end users or the consumers, whether they're within the business or outside. They're the consumer of the product, and I just think that's a great shift from where we were 10 years ago. We broadly, as in the big data industry, which was so much focused on development. Now we're finally seeing the human value to it.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, first, I mean, just 2 comments on since you and I both work for a vendor, my philosophy is, I'm not here to sell software or services. I'm really, if I think about the job that we're doing, is we're in the career management business. We're helping people be successful at their job. And if they are successful, then we all win because they get promoted, their team gets promoted. And ultimately, if they were successful because they bought great software from us and applied great business practices to it, then they'll buy more software from us, right? But the motivation, the leading motivation is people buy from people. And ultimately, it is about people. It is about, when they make a bet on the technology that we've built, it's important. We need to recognize that. And so I think that's comment number one in terms of the relationships that we vendor have to have with the community as a people to people. People buy from people. People's success is conditioned on other people's ability to help them. And so I believe in that strongly, and that's why we built this data journey program. The second piece is around the consumption of value. I think, just like you noted, we have evolved from a world where the consumption of insights by an individual is highly conditioned by this pipeline of folks that were on the way there, the folks that were conditioning the data for analysis, the people that were cleaning the data for analysis, the people that were putting the data in the format of a dashboard. And every step was, bringing value, of course, but in some way was also constraining value because we were in a construct in the past before the cloud where storage was expensive and processing computing was expensive. So we had to make trade-offs on you can only store this amount of data, you can only see this amount of data, and you can only see it this often. Now we're in a model where, in fact, every analytics systems probably could look like Google.com's website. No training, there's a search bar, you have a question, and we have superior intelligence to be able to take the complexity behind this white page that is called the internet, highly disconnected data of all formats, video, audio, text, and so forth. And now, with some magic, understand the intent behind your question and present to you, results that at scale are highly accurate, are highly related to what it is that you're looking for. And obviously we know this works because that's what Google's business has been in. But this idea of the consumer of insights, is really quite different from the business analyst world, right? Or the average employee at your organization. The average employee at an organization, when they want to know I wonder what the propensity to buy of this customer is going to be. Well, the way they're going to get the answer is probably make a few phone calls. And by the way, by the time they get the data, well, the data might be outdated, right? So how do you go from what we've been dealing with for 20 years to what we're talking about now, real time, at scale, no training, um, and anyone can get access to it, right? So that's the challenge I think that organizations have right now. And it starts with this idea that everyone inside my organization should have access to something like that. And in fact, I'm building a data product that is for consumer of insights. It's no longer for business analysts or people that I'm going to train to use dashboard. Of course that exists, but as not the scale scenario. I mean, the adoption of dashboards today in the average organization is what, 35%? What we want to do if we want to be data driven, we want to have that and something that enables you to scale at real time information so anyone can use it, get access to it, and have impact.
Yeah, and that's such a great point, which is, being able to operationalize that data is when real time becomes more significant. I think the traditional way of looking at the world, which you pointed out a little bit, was, hey, we're just going to pull a report every Monday. And in that context, real time isn't as valuable. Like maybe that data's from a week ago or a month ago. We already know that's the cadence we're looking at it. But now it's about, yeah, like you said, just feeding real time data to the applications of the consumers, making sure that data is ready for analytics and operational.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of examples. I mean, this first retailer I was talking about when I started my career. I always remember this is not very long time. This is not very long ago, by the way. Every Monday morning, we would get this printed report. We'd all wait for it. And it would just kind of like, remember those dot printers? It would just kind of print the
Mm.
report, and we'd have all the stores compare to each other against a set of metrics, and we would validate that the data would be the right one. Uh, but it's pretty prehistoric if you think about it in today's concept, right? It's just why did we have that? So there are definitely some scenarios where that's acceptable, but now they've turned from being the rule to being the exception. Like I don't think you'll find retailers today that have an online front store that are printing out every Monday reports. I mean, they are probably looking at a dashboard on a real-time basis that is telling them here is what's going on your site, in your stores. It is probably also powered by machine learning models that are ordering new inventory based on real-time behaviors on their sites, and is trying to automate this idea of like, how do I make sure that I'm maximizing inventory delivery time? And for instance, for us, we work with a lot of logistics vendors, and this idea of real-time optimization of routes, for instance, is also an important one and can save millions of dollars because depending on traffic, depending on who you're delivering to, in what order, you can really use the power of data at scale and machine learning to provide, again, a better experience, both for your drivers and for your employees and for your customers. And so this notion of real time being an exception, I think, is just not going to last very long. I think the benefits um, just outweigh the cost of investment. I think that I could have seen the trade-off in the past, where setting up a real-time infrastructure was, costly to manage and hire and build and all of that. But now you're able to do it in such a liquid manner that not doing it is almost more disadvantageous than getting it started.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we're all about real time here and we love talking about that. This podcast is called What's New in Data for a reason. Keeping a pulse on what's happening now. And I think that's going to be the standard of operational data in the future. And I think one of the other things that we've seen, thanks to the unlimited scale of compute and new technologies coming out, is we're seeing thousands of vertical applications that are hyper specific to a specific use case. And one of the really interesting things on top of that is now they're starting to use the analytics platform as a source of truth. People are starting to tie data in their CRM or their marketing platform or their pricing platform, whatever it is, to data from their analytics platform.
Yeah, and so this is a a prime example of the infrastructure you need to build in order to be able to build an effective data mesh. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Is you have the convergence of a lot of workloads that are, if you think about them as one, you'll be able to kind of provide this limitless environment for your people. And so certainly, the obvious convergence is this idea of the data lake and the data warehouse, right? Do you need to think about two different constructs? What if you just had the ability to put the data in whatever format you wanted and being able to work with it at any scale? So I think that's an important construct. The other construct that's becoming obvious is artificial intelligence and BI coming together. So AI and BI coming together, because while dashboards have their own value, we know that ultimately the value is going to be auto insights, right? So what if the system, which understood both your structured and unstructured transactional and analytical data, what if it could, create insights for you to act on? And so the convergence of AI and BI coming together is important. The convergence of real time and batch is also an important trend, because you have some workloads where it makes sense to have batch working, and you have the majority of your workloads where it makes a lot of sense for real time to be part of. But should you really think about those as two different things is a big question. And then finally, you have the convergence of the clouds, right? So obviously today the average organization has data on-prem and in the cloud, but in the past they had multiple on-prem, and now they're going to have multiple on-prem plus multiple clouds. And so being able to work in a multi-cloud environment is really important. So if you take, for instance, the simple example of anomaly detection or fraud analytics, those are scenarios that just simply would not bring any value if they didn't run in real time, right? I mean, if you think about the relationship you have with your bank, I don't know that it's helpful if they told you next month that last week there was fraudulent activity on your credit card, right? I don't think you'd bank with that credit card company very long.
Right.
And so the idea here is for this financial institution to be able to act on it as the fraud happens. And sometimes now what we're seeing is organizations that are advanced here are not only able to react to fraudulent activity, they're actually able to pre-act on them, where they can see the signs leading to a fraudulent use of your card, and they'll block the card immediately. So it's even faster than real time, if I can say it, right? And you can see that being very useful when you're running infrastructure at scale. If you think about anomaly detection in the telecommunication industry, you never want your infrastructure to go down. And so how do you use real-time technology and the information that you get across your real-time pipeline to prevent your internet pipe slowing down, like it's happened to me a few times on podcasts, or just having slowed down a network, loss of access, and all of that. And so being able to do this at the speed of business, if you will, and sometimes even faster than the speed of business, is a key differentiator, I think, for data leaders in 2022 for sure.
Yeah, and the same way that Uber has gotten consumers used to digital real-time experiences, I think clouds like Google Cloud have gotten the data practitioners used to on-demand serverless experiences for innovating within their organizations. We've been working with a lot of our users at Stream on what they are looking for in a cloud platform, which is why we made a Stream Cloud for Google Cloud, which essentially streams real-time data into Google Cloud platforms like BigQuery, Spanner, PubSub, all the other ones you can think of. And essentially, the theme here is that it lowers the total cost of ownership, and you're able to innovate and build faster when you don't have to think like, hey, I don't want to have to spin up a server and manage it and get the network infrastructure and deploy it in my VPC and think about the security. I mean, they have to think about the security, but they want that all managed for them, right? And
that's right. Yeah. I think this is, a key point, right? We can be talking about all these innovative use cases, but if you're sitting and listening to us and you're like, well, I like that, but I don't know how to get there, or I don't have the easy path to get there, we haven't done our job. And so I think a solution like yours is a great example where, how do I get there as fast as possible, while, I can focus on what my job is at the organization, right? You never really want an organization that's specialized in one industry now to become a software vendor and having to build everything. That just has the tendency of becoming maybe a little bit too expensive for them, and they have to reinvent themselves in a way that is counter to their business. Now, to be honest, in terms of what we see in organizations, is that we see an increase in data engineering maturity. So organizations have realized that data and their ability to work with data effectively is an actual skill set, an actual attribute of a modern organization. So you look at a company like Wayfair, for instance, 16,000 employees, I think, and I think they got about 3,000 data engineers and data scientists. That's close to like 18% of their employees are data people. You look at DBSA, it's a financial organization in Asia, same thing. A large proportion of their people are data engineers. So it's you're really seeing a switch in the industry where they want to think like data organizations. They want to build data products. Carrefour in Europe is another great example, using Google's platform in order to not only solve their problems internally, but also create an analytics platform so they can sell their services externally. And so you really see this switch, if you will, of organizations that are becoming data driven because they're using modern capabilities that are serverless and cloud native, and they're also hiring the people that can advance their mission on that type of platform, which really creates an incredible, on ramp into innovation in a way that just simply was not possible a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, Bruno, as head of data analytics at Google Cloud, you clearly have very unique knowledge of the data journeys across multiple industries. And based on that, what are your top predictions for data in 2022?
Well, there's a lot I could say about that, right? I think I wrote a whole piece actually on predictions, and I actually based that on what I heard from the community. I wrote two quick surveys, and I asked people, what keeps you most up at night? What do you think is important? And I think maybe the way to think about it is short, medium, and long term. So in the super short term, this concept of the data mesh, as we talked about it here, is extremely important for everybody to get a grasp around, and certainly not be confused about what it is and what it's not. And so I would say 2022, I would double down on that and make sure that you are creating your modern data stack and that you're understanding how the data mesh can help you. In the short term, I would say that you have to think about where artificial intelligence is infused across your data pipeline. And I think it's going to be a gigantic um, differentiator for organization across the entire pipeline, right? So an example, of course, is the automated data management capabilities. How do you auto prepare, auto ingest? How can you do all of that with your current stack? Can you do that? Auto insights is another big one. In this area, there are lots and lots of vendors you can look at that are kind of trailblazing. How can you have artificial intelligence helping you with this idea that you have more and more data, but you don't have the same ramp of data people that you're able to hire? And so how do you close the gap here? Because this is all connected to the more data you have, the more insights, the better business you can build. And then long term, I would think about how people are going to interact with data in general, right? And we talked about Google.com as being an example, but I'm thinking even beyond that. I have these Oculus glasses right behind me here, goggles, I guess. They're not glasses just yet, although I do have the Ray-Ban glasses somewhere. And I
Oh,
do think there's a lot to think about. How will we interact with data in 10 years from now? And it's not going to be through a keyboard. It's not going to be through a mouse. It's not probably not going to be through a browser. It might not even be through a phone. And so if you start thinking about that, what are the capabilities you should build now? How should you educate your team to start thinking about a future that is like that, where data insights are ambient?
Mm.
and they're part of everything we do. And how can they make a better experience? You imagine you wearing your glasses and just gives you insights on what you're seeing, and it allows you to make better decisions faster. And all that's done in real time on connected devices. Um, I think those are important trends. The connected thread here is this idea of artificial intelligence enabling the entire pipeline to act and react a lot faster. I joke often, I say artificial intelligence or AI, AI, the acronym AI doesn't stand for artificial intelligence only. It stands for applied and invisible. And that's kind of what I would leave you with is your technology is going to be the most helpful if it's applied to a particular workflow or a particular experience, and if it's invisible to the end consumer. Because if you have to make him work for it, you're not going to be able to create that as a habit and build a culture on top of it. It's got to be creating value immediately with very little effort from the people kind of receiving the value. And so that's one of our challenges. I think we're doing better, but I think we got a lot of work uh, ahead of us before we get to uh, making it the best that it can be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that, to tack on to that, you mentioned how important it is to make sure the AI has the real-time data and be able to just stream that real-time data into the AI models, into the training, into the operationalization of those models and whatever applications they're being consumed in. I think, or as you said, applied in.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be another critical, maybe a prerequisite to some extent. So, yeah. Well, Bruno, thank you so much for joining this episode of What's New in Data.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we'll point everybody to your data journeys. It'll be in the blog and on the podcast description.
All right.
Great, thank you.